Hey there, CityCast listeners. Are you ready to make a difference this holiday season? Food and Friends is a beacon of hope right here in DC, providing home-delivered, medically tailored meals and medical nutrition therapy to our neighbors battling cancer, HIV, AIDS, and other serious illnesses. And here's where you come in. Slice of Life, their annual pie sale, is now in its 18th year. The goal is to sell 6,000 pies, helping to provide an incredible 1.9 million meals for our neighbors in need. Better yet, these are not ordinary pies baked by schlubs like me. They are actually made to order by Whisked Bakery, the award-winning woman-owned local bakery. So here's the deal. Do good, feel good, and buy pies. Visit foodandfriends.org to place your order, and let's make this Thanksgiving a little brighter for those in need. That's foodandfriends.org, foodandfriends.org.
Today on CityCast DC, there's an interesting bill winding its way to the council right now. How would you, a DC taxpayer, feel about getting to decide which local news sources get government funding? Washington City Paper's Alex Koma is here to break down all the details. I'm producer Julia Kieran, and here's what DC is talking about. All right, so Alex, the DC Council is considering a bill that would help fund and revitalize local news. How is this thing going to work?
Well, we're definitely waiting to see whether this sort of structure makes sense. But basically what council members Janice Lewis-George and Brianne Nadeau have laid out is that this would sort of be a model that would take, I believe it's 0.1% of the DC budget every year. So for this year, that'd be about $11 million, and devote that in the form of grants that would go to local news outlets, perhaps like the two of us, if we're lucky enough. And the idea is that rather than having the politicians who we're covering decide who gets the funding, this would be a chance for, I think it's every registered voter in the district would get essentially a news voucher, a coupon of sorts, to hand out to the local media outlets that they think that deserve funding and that they would like to see get a little extra support.
So how's the council going to decide which outlets are going to get this funding via coupons?
Yeah, basically the threshold that they'll establish is they'll say that, if you're a local news outlet, you can register to potentially get this funding. That's sort of the one thing that the city has to do with all of this. And then it goes to the voters. Probably the most important distinction is that, any local news coverage that then a qualifying outlet has to offer has to be free for readers. And, it's certainly not something that even the Washington Post can say that they offer all the time. They've got a paywall. Even someone like the Washington Business Journal, one of my former employers, they've got a pretty tough paywall to get beyond because that's the model they pursue. So that could potentially either force those outlets to rethink that model or maybe just means that this money goes elsewhere. It would also exclude TV stations, not because the council doesn't especially like TV journalism, although as a former local TV news practitioner myself, I can tell you that it is not always the sort of outlet with the best incentives, but this is instead a more technical reason. Cable franchise fees pay right now for a lot of public access television, and the council was, I think, a little wary of messing with all of that because it might force some renegotiations with the cable operators, which doesn't sound pleasant.
So I think one of the top of mind things that everyone's thinking about is, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the number that they've thrown out is 0.1% of the budget. That is essentially designed to take the program out of the yearly budgeting because, ordinarily money for something like this gets determined, every year as the council and the mayor work together to decide what the spending plan is going to be. This legislation is not unusual per se, but definitely is more definitive in saying it is going to be 0.1% 1% of the budget, come hell or high water. And that I think you will probably end up seeing some pushback on because the city has a lot of other priorities. It has an uncertain budget picture moving forward. So the long and short of it is $11 million is not even close to the biggest line item on DC's budget, but it is still meaningful for sure. And it's going to get attention just because not a lot of politicians love the idea of funding local news.
So how much money will each outlet get per coupon? Is it like, does it magically pay for potentially your or my salary per coupon, or is it a little less than that? Are we thinking?
So the per coupon thing is difficult to know because it kind of depends on how many registered voters actually allocate the coupons that they get. For instance, a lot of this program is based off of similar work in Seattle, where rather than funding for local news, they were giving people funding for public elections, basically using public money to help fund local elections. And so, in that instance, obviously, you can imagine not a ton of people pay attention to local elections, just as not a ton of people pay attention to local news. And so I think you can imagine a world where you're seeing only a small percentage of registered voters actually allocate this money. So the amount per coupon, we're not quite sure about. But, if it's $11 million, some of the numbers that the council members outlined as they started selling the bill basically said maybe a news outlet, maybe something like City Paper, which has a devoted following, we hope, but, is not the largest news outlet in town. Could they expect to see 10, 20%? And that means, a couple $100,000 a year. I mean, speaking for us, that's certainly not nothing. Is it enough to fund an extra reporter or two? Yeah, maybe. It depends on how the news outlets would start budgeting around this and trying to treat this as a regular contribution.
Speed into success. Learn French. Much like a high-speed train, Alliance Francais's immersive French language classes propel you toward fluency. Unlock a world of personal and professional possibilities when you become a member and learn French at our renowned Alliance Francaise chapter in DC. Tradition and modernity intertwine, offering you an unparalleled learning experience that includes language classes, cultural events, and the only lone library in French language in the Mid-Atlantic region. Embrace the language that bridges cultures and enriches your resume. Enroll today. The winter session starts on November 29th. All ages and levels welcome. If you sign up by November 3rd, you get a $20 discount off the tuition fee. Find us at francedc.org.
All right, Alex. So what is actually the likelihood that this thing is going to make its way through the council and get passed?
We've got 2 council members that have co-introduced it. We're not sure yet how many are going to co-sponsor it. That's kind of a good sign for gauging the early support on the council, is how many people are willing to slap their name on it. It doesn't always mean if you get a majority of council members that the bill's going to move. It, much like things in Congress, it depends which committee it goes to. And I'd say, the early reaction to it has been pretty divided. So it's very TBD whether this happens at all.
So who exactly wrote this bill? You mentioned that council is like, maybe yes, maybe no on this thing going through, because it seems like council members Janice Lewis-George and Brianna Doe didn't write this themselves, right?
Yeah, I think as is the case with many bills that you'll see come before the council, they were certainly involved in what I would describe as taking an idea and making it work for DC's system of governance. But the idea itself comes from a left-leaning group called the Democracy Policy Network. They are basically working on ideas, that I would describe as sort of pushing the envelope, thinking out of the box for things that could make local government, federal government, a little more innovative and democracy stronger. They are proponents of things like the Green New Deal, as well as, in fact, more public funding for campaigns themselves, which is kind of how they landed on this Seattle idea. And they have been sort of beating the drum of local news funding as this idea has gained steam elsewhere around the country, as a way to, restore a little more trust in government by helping people feel a little more in tune with what their local government is doing.
You and I both know that news is considered the fourth estate, and it's obviously important that there's a barrier between journalists and the government. Obviously, potentially, if the government is paying journalists, that might sway journalists to kind of steer clear maybe of something fishy going down. So does this bill take that into consideration? How does it protect journalistic integrity?
The way that they are trying to address that is via the voucher concept, right? The idea being that even though the government will administer the program, and it's worth saying that they're also hoping to set up, I think it's called a community journalism board with various government officials who will sort of look over the money, make sure that it's being spent appropriately, that it's, the various news outlets, it'll have to go into a separate account and the government will have some visibility into what they're doing with it, if they are indeed using it to expand local coverage and that sort of thing. So it's not as if the government will have zero role here, but they are essentially hoping to eliminate those kinds of concerns by saying to voters, you're the ones who are going to decide where this money goes. The question is, how they sort of build that engagement among people. I mean, we definitely have a lot of people who read about and care local news, but it's as local news has declined, so has our readership. And so it's a real open question to me about whether this can get the kind of public participation it needs to not have just the most committed voices in the community being the ones deciding where this funding goes. That to me is as much of the question as it is about government independence at this point. Is it going to be the same 5 people that are commenting on all our articles and tweeting them out who are essentially making this decision?
Why do they think this bill is necessary? Like, if they think funding local news is important, why not just be like, hey, you know what? Every newspaper, maybe you get like a paywall or you turn to a nonprofit and the government funds it. Like, why do they think this bill is the solution?
Yeah, I mean, news outlets around the country have been experimenting with different models, but the problem is none of them have worked really so far. And so this is sort of another iteration in the experiment, I would say. That the reason that they see this as important is because both from the council members' perspective and from, these national advocates' perspective, is that there are a lot of studies that show that local journalism tends to save government's money by rooting out corruption and abuse. It tends to reduce polarization because it makes issues feel a little more local and a little less national, which is certainly something we've seen in DC over the last few years in particular. And, I think that those are all interests that the government can reasonably have, even if they may not relish getting tough questions from you or I. They could still have interest in these other factors. And I think that their argument is, even if we don't know for sure that this model will work, we've got to try something because local news outlets, both in DC and around the country, are really struggling right now. Even the Washington Post is laying off, I think it's 250 journalists they're asking to take buyouts, and a good number of those are coming on the local desk. And if the Washington Post, owned by the richest man in the world, can't do this, then who can?
All right, picture this. You are at the airport or strolling through the grocery store, and suddenly there they are, someone who seems tailor-made for you. You know that feeling, right? The instant connection you can't ignore. But then they leave. Another missed connection? Not with Never Missed, a new dating app that turns those chance encounters into unforgettable beginnings. It's simple. Download the Never Missed app for free right now on the App Store or Google Play. In just moments, you will be ready to transform fleeting glances into lasting connections. Download the Never Missed app and make your story of how you met an unforgettable chapter in your journey.
What if we told you that this could be a great time to save on a new home? The Arbor at Tacoma is situated for your most convenient urban lifestyle and is now offering 2.5% credit to use to buy down your interest rate below market rates, or pay a portion of your closing costs on your brand new home. The kitchens feature striking dark navy and white cabinetry with champagne bronze hardware, and throughout the residence, you'll find wood plank flooring and smart home technology. Select homes even feature a private outdoor space. Perfect whether you want to enjoy the vibrant Tacoma, DC community or comfortably retreat into a sleek sanctuary all your own. With a quick walk to the metro, the city is all yours. Or stay close and enjoy the on-site retail. Located at 218 Cedar Street Northwest, the Arbor Tacoma offers brand new 1- and 2-bedroom condos starting in the upper 300,000s. Visit thearborliving.com or contact our sales managers for more information. Our 2.5% credit is only available for a limited time. Again, visit thearborliving.com for details.
You mentioned the potential Post layoffs, and obviously Councilmember Louis George, she introduced this bill at the time when the Post is making those cuts. So what's your take on the state of local news in DC amid those cuts coming?
Yeah, frankly, I wish I had more optimistic things to say.
You and me both.
Yeah, I mean, the small bit of good news is that we have seen new outlets start up, such as CityCast, such as Axios moving into the local space, and that's been very good for DC journalism. But on the flip side is the Post has, been steadily cutting back its metro section, basically ever since Jeff Bezos took over. The Post has the most resources of anyone, and they kind of set the pace around here. And the other place to turn is to look at NPR's affiliate, WAMU, which also owns DCist, which again has for years been one of the premier places to find local DC news. And they have seen several prominent reporters leave, Martin Ostermuhle chief among them, as their top DC correspondent, Jordan Pascal, who was their transportation reporter, and they haven't even started hiring for those positions. And it makes you worry as a local reporter. At the one hand, there are fewer people pursuing scoops alongside you, so I guess I can't be that mad about it, but it definitely shoots your eyebrows up as you see fewer and fewer people at these press conferences alongside you, making you wonder how sustainable is this in our city without, whether it's this solution or something else, a change here.
So if this thing is passed, what kind of impact do you think this bill would have on DC's news scene, which is kind of undergoing a little bit of attrition right now?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm hopeful. I mean, it's obviously very difficult to know because even though there have been efforts to fund local news elsewhere around the country, it's never quite looked like this. There have been, considerations of direct grants. There have been considerations of tax credits at both the state and federal level, but it's never quite looked like this, news voucher program. So it's hard to know. As I alluded to before, will local news outlets be able to make decisions about hiring reporters, expanding their coverage area, investing in new office space or tools or equipment if they don't know how much of their funding that they're getting year over year? I just don't know. I'm not in the accounting department, but it strikes me that just as the government needs to know how much money is coming in to set its budget each year, that it will be difficult for news outlets if they don't know, hey, maybe people vote for, the competition this year and your grant funding diminishes. I'm sure it'll all still be helpful. Will it, force a sea change in local journalism? Well, I suppose it would have to be a kind of wait and see approach. And frankly, I'm just not sure if we'll even get the chance to find out, but I suppose we'll see.
Alex Koma, thank you for explaining this bill to us. And I don't know, maybe we'll both get coupons in our near future funded by the taxpayers.
Yeah, I'll come back and talk to you when I get my first raise coming out of this.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend who would use their local news coupon on us? They can rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. See ya!